Hello, Fear the Mere Cat here, and welcome to another episode of my Let's Play. Be afraid of those things. Anyway, I'm showing this off because I come back here later, having realised I can't actually get the thing that I tried to get here. But if you come back here a second time, it doesn't give you this introduction to what Ganon's castle looks like. So that's why I've added it in, even though it's a bit pointless. So there's a gold sculpture here, but you can't get it without the Hookshot. If you throw in that red thing, it just takes you back to the beginning of the castle again. And for some reason I tried a second time to get the thing I couldn't get. And then I edited that out, because that was stupid of me. And this is me headbutting a tree with a horse. And the horse doesn't like it much. Never mind. And as you can see, that tree, it sort of looks like a cigar now. Well, in my opinion, anyway. But yeah, this is what a Kakariko vase looks like now. I assume I'm trying to show that off because I didn't cut this a bit of travelling out. I don't know, I don't remember. It's been a few days since I actually recorded this. I know recently I haven't been putting my new recordings up very frequently. What the guy's vibe looks like now. I've just been quite busy and maybe a tiny bit lazy too, but I don't actually have that much to say about this episode anyway, so there might be some bits of silence. I don't think the stuff I do in this episode is as fascinating as the Forest Temple, but it's impossible to get there without getting Hookshot, so. And this has grown out of the magic beans that were planted there. A magic bean, I suppose, since there's only one of them. There are poles here which can get quite annoying whilst you're trying to move these graves. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you which grave is Dampé's, but with these graves it's usually the ones with the flowers in front of them that have something helpful in them underneath them. And we don't know what this place is called, apparently. Dampé sort of cheats here because he lobs fire at you, and apparently, even though he's not a Poe, he makes the same laughing noise as a Poe. I guess that's just something that all of the guys do, but it's best to avoid this fire really. It doesn't hurt your health that much, but it's better to be quick here. You don't need to beat him. In fact, it's almost impossible to do. I've never seen anyone manage to do it. But these doors do close after a little while after he goes through them. So it's best to try to go quickly here. You can cartwheel through this to make it quicker. but that does mean that you're more likely to accidentally run into the fire. Not that I don't run into the fire anyway, even though it's straight in front of me, but you can go on this middle one. I think is actually quicker than going to the left as he does it. Right, this is the only bit where you absolutely have to roll on the floor to be able to get here on time. Oh, I do anyway, otherwise I always get to that door too late. Now you can come back here, and if you do it in under a minute, you get a heart piece. So I might be showing that off later. I doubt I'll manage to get it in under a minute. I've never managed to before, but I could try. Usually if you use the long shot instead of car wheeling, that manages to get you up there quicker. Except I need to aim the hook shot, and I'm not very good at that. It always takes me a long time, so it ends up being slower instead of faster. It's good that Link's now the right height for these chests, I feel. It just feels pleasant. Hookshot is sort of like the boomerang, but even better because you can actually hoist yourself up to things, but it's mostly useful for getting gold sculptures, and it's quite useful in the dungeons as well, as you'll see when we eventually get to the Forest Temple, although that will be next episode. This is the first instance of us playing the Song of Time to get rid of these blocks. I don't know what people used to do in the pre-internet days to work out that that's what you're supposed to do, because as far as I know there are no hints within the game that that's what the Song of Time does. And now we're coming up on one of the most interesting sort of timey-wimey science fiction things, time travel things in the game, which is the predestination paradox. You see, what happened is that he teaches you on your Ocarina how to play this song that you taught him 7 years ago to play. Or from his perspective, you taught him it 7 years ago, but you haven't travelled back in time to 7 years ago yet. So you haven't played it in front of him yet. So see, the way a predestination paradox works is through time travel, the second event chronologically causes the first event chronologically to happen. You'll see basically how this works later on in the game, but I'm quite impressed that they managed to put this in. I wish there were more time travel things that are as clever as this in the game, and they aren't, but this is one of the reasons why I think that the time travel elements in this game work better than the ones in Majora's Mask. There's a bit of slowdown there. I'm not sure if what I'm saying now it corresponds to the images, so it might be a bit out of sync. I don't know why this thing just had slowdown for a few seconds. I don't know what I cut out that. I don't think it matters, actually. I don't need to tell you a complete list of bits I cut out, I suppose. Basically, I've tried to leave in everything that seemed kind of helpful, I suppose. But I had to mess around a lot here in order to remember which houses you need to get up to, because you can only reach them from certain points, otherwise the hookshot dot doesn't turn red. That red dot isn't there, which means that you can't use the hookshot at that point. And then I tried to use a hookshot to reach a different place, which I could have sworn I managed to reach before, where you talk to a guy on the roof. I think he gives you a heart piece, but we'll have to go for that once I've got the long shot. Anyway, I might as well talk about a couple of games that I've played recently, because, as I said, I don't actually have a lot to say about the actual action that's going on in this video, because I think these two games show the difference between a pretty good game and an amazing game. They're quite old games, but this is the first time I've gone round to actually playing them. So, recently I played Batman Arkham Asylum, and that was a pretty decent game. I don't make as much fuss about it as most people do, but yeah, it was a decent enough game. And then I started playing Mass Effect. Haven't finished it yet, and maybe the ending will be terrible. I doubt it. I've heard the ending to the third Mass Effect game is, but I think these two games, I know you wouldn't normally compare them, because one's kind of a superhero game and the other one's kind of a science fiction sort of interactive movie in a way type game, but I think that they demonstrate the difference between what makes a decent game and what makes a great game. Now, all of the bosses, all of the boss characters in Arkham Asylum are really interesting. Batman himself isn't interesting in Arkham Asylum. I think that's really a pity, because what I always liked about something that I've always felt and liked about Batman was that he was as interesting as the villains, but I don't think they managed to pull that off this time, because he's so monosyllabic in the game and emotional, and that's just kind of boring. But the bosses were really good. The music, I didn't notice that much. And there's plenty of variety in the bosses and the enemies. I certainly have to admit that. So, you know, those are all good things, I think. The mixture of gadgets and bosses and puzzles and just kind of fighting worked well. But this is the thing, it's always like this in Arkham Asylum, and this is one of the reasons why I don't want to play any of the other Arkham games, probably not for several years now, and that is, it was always the same pattern in the game. What you would have is, you would have Batman fight some people, some fairly generic henchmen, and then he solves a puzzle, and then he fights some more generic henchmen, puzzle, more generic henchmen, occasionally wandering back and forth trying to find where you're supposed to be, and then a boss, and then the whole thing repeats itself over and over. And I'll get back to talking about that in a second. But one thing I want to point out here, which is really weird, is not only do the Kokori children just stay as children and never become adults, which means there's no such thing as adult-sized Kokori clothing, but also that sage guy with the beard must have created adult-sized clothing whilst inside the Temple of Time, because he's the only guy who's in there, and then changes Link's clothing as he grew older, and I just think the implications of that are a bit sort of weird and quite disturbing. Anyway, yes, but with Mass Effect, what you've got is you have to choose everything. You have to choose what words your character uses in conversations. There are various sort of moral dilemmas in the game. You need to choose what your character looks like as well, and there are other RPG elements like choosing upgrades, for example, and it just seems to me that creates so much more variety, because everything sort of hangs on you making the right choices, and you sort of create the hero as you go on through choosing what he says and the way he acts. And for me, that just gave it the incredible sense of variety that Arkham Asylum doesn't have. And there's also moving in vehicles and, well, a sort of armoured tank thing, and there's also combat as well. But it's just that having the choices makes things so much more interesting than just punch this guy, punch this guy, punch this guy, puzzle, wander around for a bit, punch this guy, punch this guy, punch this guy. That's not really variety. That's really just doing the same things over and over. It just didn't interest me. Well, either that was worth hearing or it wasn't, but that's my 2 cents on great games versus decent games. Yeah, I couldn't work out how to get past this guy at first, and I got hurt up. And yes, I did use the save feature that I can only manage to use because I'm using ROM and an emulator. So whether or not you feel that's cheating, and whether or not you feel that's unfair because when you had to play it you weren't playing the ROM, you were playing the proper version, is up to you. I mean, I don't use blitzes, but I kind of make my own choice about what I feel is okay to do and what isn't. But I will be trying not to use this extra ability to save too often. There might be times when I'm tempted to use it, when I fight the boss in the Forest Temple, for example, but I will try not to. I don't know why I don't just decide to stay in the water here, because you can clearly see that you can reach another ledge from that water, but never mind. Sort of stupid that they can't turn around and look behind them, although it is extremely helpful. Maybe I could be a bit self-deprecating about these things. You don't need to hear me say, well, I don't think my commentary was interesting in this episode, or whatever. But I'll admit, this hasn't been my favourite episode to record, and if you are hoping for something better, I assure you that the Forest Temple is infinitely more interesting than watching me get hurt. So, the only good thing about this creature is that you can literally stab him in the back later on, once you have some arrows. So that almost makes this feel worthwhile. And do you remember that it was predicted that this place would become important for you and Sarah, or Sarai? I don't know how you want to pronounce that, but yes, he said it would be. And no, that's not Sarai, but you will be meeting her later on. I'm not sure what a minuet is. I don't know much about classical music. It does kind of look like the word minute, but I'm sure it doesn't mean a minute of forest. You might have noticed that they add extra instruments when you learn these songs. Never mind, it's their game, they're allowed to do that. I think we're coming up on the end of this episode, so next time we'll be going into the Forest Temple, and I will see you then.